Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, I'm going to show you how to install crown molding. Well, it's something a little different this week on the show. And I remember the first time I installed crown molding many years ago, and honestly, the internet didn't exist. Hard to believe, I know, but the internet was not a thing. So you had to actually learn from either a carpenter who knew, or you had to go to your local library and dig out some books and learn how to do it. And at that point in time, I had a cheaper compound miter saw, and I cut it so that it was flat to either the fence or the table of the miter saw, and I would use a compound angled cut to cut each one. You save the left, you keep the right, all kinds of crazy stuff in order to get it to work, and it was rather complicated. But today I'm going to show you an easy way to install it, and the first thing we want to do is go through some basics of crown molding. Well, here we have a piece of crown that I will be installing in the front foyer of my house. And I guess the first thing you want to know is, what is the top? This is not symmetrical crown molding. A lot of it is not, but you can get it where both top and bottom are identical. This is not. So which is the top? Well, to be honest, the detail goes on the bottom. When it comes to crown molding, your plain section is at the top and your detail is at the bottom. So there you go. That's the first thing to know with crown molding. The other thing that you need to know, and this is most important, it never changes. Do not change it for cutting your inside and outside corners. You always cut it upside down. So the top is always sitting on the table of your miter saw. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is the orientation of, or what your piece will look like when it's installed. How to check and verify that you're cutting a piece correctly before you actually put the blade to the wood. And what I can say to you is that if it's an inside corner, your bottom of your crown molding, this will be the section that you keep, your bottom is going to be the long piece. If you want it to be an outside corner, well, you can probably figure this one out. It's reversed. This is the piece we're keeping. This is our offcut. The top of the crown molding will always be the longer length of your 45 when it is an outside corner. So the next thing that we want to look at, now that we know the top and the bottom and how to visually verify that you're cutting the right way, depending on if it's an inside corner or an outside corner, is we want to set up our miter saw. Well, the very first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that your blade is square to your table. So we'll just turn on our tilt box here, zero it out, and check our blade to make sure that it's square. And there we go. Once the blade stops vibrating, it is indeed square to the table. The next thing that you want to do is you just want to get a combination square, one that you trust that has a true 45, and we're going to set it up in such a way that we can check to see if our blade is cutting at 45. So just lock your blade down, tilt it to 45 degrees, and check to make sure that it is in fact cutting at 45. And I can tell you right now, mine gets used so infrequently that this is drastically out. So I'm going to have to calibrate my saw for the 45 degrees that I need. And then when I get that done, I'm going to come back and see you. Okay, and now that I'm happy with this being 45 degrees at the positive stops, I will just tighten everything back down, and then we can move on to the next step of setting up your saw. Well, when crown molding gets cut, we cut it so that it's sitting just like this, as if it were mounted on the wall. And I'm going to show you that a little better here. But the first thing we want to do is place some masking tape on the bed or the table of our miter saw. And we're going to be placing it here because we're going to be placing a mark. Some miter saws have crown stops that you can set up on the side that will allow you to set up the crown molding. Mine does not. So for that, I need the masking tape to be able to place a mark. So now that you have your pieces of tape there, we want to take a piece of crown molding, place it on our saw, and tip it so that it's up, mounted in the same position as if it was mounted on the wall. So that will be just like this, with our 45s flush here on our fence and here on our table. And once you're happy with where that is, just mark it here on your tape. And then do the same thing on the other side. And as long as your board or your crown molding lines up with that mark, you'll have it set perfectly for what you need in order to cut the miters. So now that you have those marks done, it's time to take some measurements of your wall. Well, here we have the shorter of the four walls, just so that I can get the whole thing on camera to show you how to take the measurement. So for each wall, you need an accurate measurement from left to right, right to left, either way from corner to corner. And you don't want to be bending your tape measure like this and trying to get into the corners. That's just a fool's game. It never works. So measure all the way over, and then we're going to measure to an even number here. So in my case, I'm going to go to 40 inches. And once I have it at the 40 inches, I'm going to place a little mark on the wall. Now this will be behind the crown, so you'll never see it. The next thing you want to do is reverse your tape measure and come from this side. And I'm measuring at this point, I have 32 3/16. So 32 3/16 plus our original 40 is 72 3/16. So I'm going to go all the way around measuring each one of the four walls and record my measurements so that I know exactly how long my pieces are. So what I've done is I've marked all of my measurements onto a piece of paper as well as on the wall, and I've marked what wall they're for, east, south, west, and north. One thing you want to keep in mind is the same tape measure that you measured the walls with, use that tape measure to measure your crown, just in case for some odd reason the tape measure that you have in your house and the one that you have in your shop are different. So the first thing you want to do is mark out the direction of which way your miters will go. So if you remember, I said that all inside corners, the bottom of our crown molding has to be the long point. So here is our bottom, because as I also said, it gets cut upside down. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a mark here on our crown, remembering the bottom is long for inside cuts, and we're just going to place a light mark to make sure that we have our angle going the right way. We'll also take our measurement for this piece here. I'm going to do the south wall, which is 97 5/16. So we're going to measure along our length and place a measurement or a mark there, just roughly. And then we're going to place that same angled mark on our piece, just lightly, so we know which way the angle goes. Now it's time to make our first cut. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my crown molding, We're going to line it up with that line that we placed on our masking tape earlier, hold it securely in place. We can see which way our angle goes here, and once we have it firmly where we want it and we're happy with its alignment on that tape line, we can set the angle at our 45 degrees and follow through with the cut. And there is our first cut on the crown done. You now want to measure from the very tip all the way down to your proper measurement for your wall, and then once I get that mark on there, I'll show you how to make that cut. So once you get your mark and you're happy with it, line up your crown molding again with those marks on the masking tape of your saw. My off cut is down here at the right. You want to spin your blade around to 45. Make sure that you're cutting along that pencil line that you put earlier, and once you're happy with how it lines up and where it's situated here, you can follow through with your cut. And I'm just double checking on my measurement, and it looks pretty good. So now that I'm happy with the measurements, I'm going to carry on and cut all the rest of my 4 pieces, following with the measurements that I took earlier, and make sure you write on the back of each piece what wall it's for, and that way there's no confusion when it comes time to the installation. There's one measurement you need before you head inside to install it, and that is the measurement from your fence to your line. And I'll explain that more when we get inside. For me, that is 2 15/16. So we'll remember that measurement and head inside for the installation. So the next thing that we need to do is place a mark on the wall from our ceiling down, the same measurement that we took off of our tape on our miter saw, 2 15/16. Just a tiny little mark there, and that will represent the bottom of our piece of crown molding. So we'll put one at either end, and then we can mount our crown. So once you get it in line, we're just going to use a brad nailer with some 18 gauge 2-inch nails. We'll line it up with our line that we just placed on our wall. And once we're happy with it, shoot it into place. Now you may want to get someone to help you on the longer pieces, but let's get an adjoining piece on here and I'll show you how they made up. So this is a bit of a longer piece, so I have someone helping me on the other side, and I have placed my mark at 2 15/16 down from the ceiling at the opposite end, and on this end, we're just going to line up our corners. And once we get them lined up, we'll shoot our nails in. Now I would like to point out that these corners are not a perfect miter. The reason for that is that the walls are imperfect. There are jigs on the market that will actually measure the angle of your wall and set your saw so that it cuts a perfectly compound mitered cut to fit perfectly in the corner. I live in an old wartime home. I know that the corners are not perfect, and I expect these gaps. And once I get the rest of the crown installed, I'm going to show you how we're going to repair them. Now, in order to fill in any imperfections, what I'm going to use is a crown molding caulking. It's a latex caulk. It's paintable. You can paint over it in 30 minutes. It's great to fill the nail holes as well. Not having your walls perfectly at 90 degrees and barring having one of those jigs that I spoke about earlier, those gaps are inevitable in this case. So have some of this stuff on hand. Is it cheating? I don't think so. It's part of the installation. So I'm going to get all this caulked up and I'll see you when I get it done. And with a little bit of work and a little bit of that latex caulk, you can get some pretty professional results all the way around your room. So here I'm just going to wait for the caulking to dry, and then I can paint these and be finished with it. Okay, so that works out great if you have all inside corners like what I had in that front foyer area. What if you've got outside corners? Well, I don't have any to demonstrate the installation. However, I have scrap offcuts that I can show you how to make the outside corners. So let's head to the saw and I'm going to show you what to do with that. Well, if you remember, I said that when cutting the crown on the saw, the top of the crown is always facing down. In other words, you're cutting it upside down. And you'll also remember the rule of thumb that I gave you was that when you're cutting inside corners, the bottom of your crown molding is the long end of your cut. And when you're cutting outside corners, the top of your crown molding is going to be the long section of your cut. I know it looks strange because it's reversed. This is where some people get confused. The reason that I'm saying this is the bottom and this is the top is because it's upside down, because that's the way you cut it. So if we need to cut it so that it's an outside corner, let me flip it over so that it's the right orientation for our installation. Remember I said that outside corners, the top of our crown molding is our long piece. So we're going to draw our 45, and I'll do the same thing on our other side. Remember, top of your crown is your long section of your 45. Now I'm not going to measure, that's just a guideline for me. So all you need to do, and of course you would be measuring this, you wouldn't just be winging it like what I am. You place, see, I almost put it the wrong way, upside down so that the top of the crown is right up against your bed of your miter saw. You want to hold it in place where your line is, just like you did with the other one. You'll set your 45-degree angle, and once you're happy with it and your measurements are right and you've got it all lined up for your cut, hold it in place and follow through with the cut. Now for the opposite end, of course, you will do the same thing, except you'll be cutting on the opposite side of the saw. So you will line it up with the marks on your saw, hold it against your fence, make sure you're happy with it, turn this around to 45 the opposite way. This is why we place our marks on it here, so that we can see as a reference whether or not we're cutting it correctly. Just like this. And then hold it in place and follow through with your cut. And those are the cuts for an outside corner. Let me just chop this in half, and I'll show you how it goes. So remember, on the outside corner, as I said, the top is the long section. So this would sit on your wall just like this. This is the top of our crown, and this is the top of our crown. And this, my friends, just like that, that is your outside corner of your crown molding. So it's as simple as that for cutting your outside corners and your inside corners, as I demonstrated earlier in the show. And there you have it. Cutting and installing crown molding. Guys, crown molding is one of those things that's very intimidating. And I think part of the reason why it is so intimidating is because people don't understand how to cut it. So this tutorial here today is a very basic how-to on inside corners. I covered that a little more extensively, and then a little bit on the outside corners of how to cut them. They're the basic rules that you need to follow. Number one, that crown gets cut upside down on your saw. Number two, make sure that you place the tape marks there so that you know exactly how to line it up. Number 3, make sure that on your outside corners, the top of your crown molding is the length of your measurement, and on your inside corners, the bottom of your crown molding is the length of your measurement. It's as simple as that. That's the 4 rules of crown molding. Now, if you're installing something like oak crown molding or that sort of thing, and you want those perfect results, you know what? I would, at that point in time, if it was my house and my job, I would consider one of those fancy jigs as part of the cost of installation, and that way every single mitered corner would be 100% perfect and would line up beautifully, and there would be no need for the caulking. And if you want to do that with this fiberboard, or the MDF crown molding as well, then you can do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I don't want you to think that there's something wrong with using the proper latex caulking. That's what it's for. That's what it's designed for. That's what it was made to do. It was made to fill in the imperfections that are caused when cutting crown molding and installing it in a less than perfect 90-degree corner. It's just the nature of the beast, and there's nothing that you can do with it. With my walls in that front room there, it is all lath and plaster. There is no way for it to be perfect, no matter how you look at it. There are imperfections and waves in the wall. This house is 50 some odd years old, so you have to work with what you've got. But as long as you take your time and follow the steps that I've shown you here today, there is absolutely no reason why you can't install crown molding like a professional. Follow those 4 rules, measure carefully like what I showed you, and you should have absolutely no problems whatsoever. Guys, this show came out of a necessity. It came out of a necessity because I had to install some crown molding. And then I remembered how I used to do it and that sort of thing. And I got to thinking, you know what? I wonder if there's other people out there that have never done it and they don't know how to do it. And that's when I figured, you know what, maybe it's time to throw a show out there and demonstrate how to do it. And hopefully you found it useful. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the bell so that you don't miss the notifications of future episodes of the program. It's been a lot of fun. No, it hasn't. It's construction work and I'm working today. So how fun is it? I'm just kidding. It's woodworking. I had fun. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. I truly appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed the content. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you're going to give this a try for yourself in your own home. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.